My name is Lee Graves-Wolf, and I'm joined with my colleague David Jennings, who will be keeping an eye on the chat for me and for us. If you have any questions along the way, don't hesitate to chime in. Today's Teaching Toolkit Thursday is centered around reflective practice. And as with every Teaching Toolkit Thursday, we have a very brief presentation where I'll share some scholarship and resources for about 15 minutes, and then we'll have most of the time to share and brainstorm and chat together. So let's start out with the question, what is reflective practice? And that term can have many different meanings depending on the person and your personal or professional situation. We are specifically looking at reflective practice in the context of teaching and the development of teaching, and our teaching practice as practitioners, engaging and reflecting on our teaching experiences on an ongoing basis in order to learn from them or to benefit future action. In other words, what is it that we can do differently to enhance the learning outcomes of our students? And in a moment, when I'm finished here, I will pop the link to the slides in the chat, or maybe David can do that for me as well. There are hyperlinks in each of the slides that link out to additional resources. We have an entire page on our teaching and learning website dedicated to reflective practice. So there's two main elements of reflective practice, doing and thinking, which refer respectively to the action of teaching and reflecting on that action. So it is a fairly simple concept that we're doing something, we're acting, we're teaching, and then we're taking time to look back on that action and think about it. There's lots to gain from reflecting on practice. It can start to build your confidence in your own teaching style and strategies. You can learn where your strengths lie and where you may need to improve or seek professional development. It develops your ability to understand how your students learn and how we can best support them in learning. Increases flexibility in adapting teaching and openness to experimenting with new ideas. Identifies assumptions in teaching, so we might be able to find some of our biases and assumptions and become more aware of perspectives and cultural worldviews of others, and can advance practice overall. And there's loads and loads of research to back the fact that reflective practices in teaching and learning in general are positive activities. So the reflective process is something that we're always doing. This little icon may look familiar to some of you, the development workspace, where we have to reflect on a yearly basis. If you're doing promotion from one level to another, there's always elements of reflection in the work that we do. And there's many models that we can look at to support reflective practice. So I'm going to go through these briefly, and they are easily adaptable to your own practice. You could meld all four of them together or pick one maybe that fits best with your context. The first one is from Daniel Schoen, his name is very synonymous with reflective practice, wrote a book a long time ago called The Reflective Practitioner. And he situates reflective practice in two ways: reflection in action, thinking while doing, and then reflection on action, which is thinking after the event. So the first one would be in the moment as it happens. So say you're giving a lecture and you're thinking at the moment. You may be taking quick notes during class. You might be asking students for feedback on the fly using a show of hands or something like poll everywhere, and checking in on students in the moment. And then the reflection on action is taking that step back and journaling or thinking about what went well, what didn't go so well. You could also pull in others in the process as well, speaking with a mentor or a critical friend. We in teaching and learning have a lot of resources around this as well. So it's one model of operationalizing reflective practice. Another goes a little bit more in depth. This is from Kolb in 1984, David Kolb, and he has 4 steps to reflective practice. The first is having a concrete experience in teaching. and then reviewing and reflecting on the experience. And then the next is sort of an extension of the of Schoen's model, where you're conceptualizing something from that experience. So you might think about maybe revising a lecture or an activity that the students do and thinking about what that might look like. And then the final step is planning and applying what you have learned. So putting those changes into action. And then you can see in the diagram here that it's a continual cycle. Almost, if anyone's familiar with action research or design-based research, you're in this constant cycle of revising and reflecting and thinking and putting things into action. We're getting more complex as we go along with the different models here. The next one is from Graham Gibbs. This is Gibbs' reflective cycle, where you start with what happened. So this is sort of reflecting upon an event. And you talk about your feelings, what you were thinking and feeling. You evaluate the experience. You analyze what sort of sense making can you make. You come to a conclusion about what else you could have done, what you could have improved upon, and then you put an action plan in place based upon that cycle of reflection. And again, that repeats over time. And you can ask yourself through these cycles, prompts about how you were feeling, how did it make you feel, what went well, what didn't go well. Pretty questions that are standard, that would become natural when you are reflecting on an activity, but it's that act of really being purposeful and documenting and writing and collecting artifacts around an experience in a very sort of targeted and procedural way is the important piece of reflective practice. We can always debrief with others after an experience verbally, or chat with a colleague, say after a class or a lecture, but it's this sort of very thoughtful piece that makes that next step sort of into reflective practice. And the last framework I'll share is from Rolf, Freshwater, and Jasper. Theirs is the what model, asking a series of questions starting with what happened, what was my role, what action did I take, and the like. Then moving on to another cycle of reflection of so what. So what does this tell me about my relationship with my teaching and my students? What did I base my actions on? So what other knowledge can I bring? And then finally, the now what, making a plan of action based upon that cycle of thinking. What do I need to improve next? How can I transfer this to another context? And so on and so forth. So any of those models are ones that you can base your own reflective practices upon, and they've been sort of tried and tested, if you will, over the years from a research perspective, and are often cited in professional development and educational developer literature in providing a nice foundation for reflective practice. Now, as I started out with, reflective practice is a term that can mean many things to many different people. And a lot of questions that we have, or resources people seek from us, are asking if students can engage in this reflective practice as well. And of course, this is something you can also use as a potential teaching strategy itself, having students take that metacognitive approach to assessing their own learning and an experience. And there's a new model for that has just recently come out from Wilson just last year, called the synthesized model of reflection. And again, you can see a bit of complexity on the screen here, but there you'll start to see as we deconstruct this some similar pattern. So in stage one of the synthesized model of reflection, there is a self-evaluation where you're looking at whatever the learning objective is or experience, and assessing and sort of sharing your knowledge, learning experience, and identity in that. Then stage two is having an experience, whether that be a lecture, a lab, an exam, modules, right? Things that you're going to experience in stage two. Stage 3, what was influenced by context and what was influenced by me in my role, is an interesting stage. And this is a stage where if you're, say, in a professional program that has external qualifications, where you can look at external um, criterion and objectives and sort of layer those into stage 3, where students and yourselves can look at those, your experiences comparing to the standards. And then in stage 4, you go back, look over everything, and reevaluate your self-efficacy, resilience, and reevaluate that knowledge, experience, identity, and learning in that whole cycle. And you can imagine in that sort of phased process, many artifacts can come out of that, whether it be the written reflections themselves or going back and looking at examinations and the like. So what do you do then with these reflections? You can keep them to yourself is one thing that you can do and just build this work into your practice. But there are other powerful ways that you can share the reflections as well. You can share your teaching. This links out to a page on our teaching and learning website where you can download a case study template and maybe thinking about submitting your work or a practice that you do. You can create a professional development portfolio. This could be either, again, something public that you're sharing or something that you're keeping in your own records over time and that you might reference as the years go on. You can apply for awards. Many teaching and learning awards ask you to have a reflective element. And if you've got a collection of years or months or days even of reflections, you can go back upon those and pull from your prior reflections for applications. And finally, as I think I mentioned earlier, the faculty promotion process is full of self-reflective moments and areas where we are asked to reflect upon the work that we've done. And so putting in sort of a process for this and a flow and a pattern in your own work can be really, really helpful for other work that you may have to do down the road. So with that, we have another Teaching Toolkit Thursday coming up on the 21st of November on concept mapping. But with that, we'll stop the recording and then hope to peek at the chat here and see if you have additional questions or thoughts about the process itself.